You can pose your question.
Yeah, Professor, one of the most important issue as a Sri Lankan and a member of the, particularly a member of the minority community, is always facing is this, unfortunately, from time to time, we have this sectarian violence which is taking place over a period of time. Now, if you start it from immediately after the our freedom, in 58, we had a Tamil issue, ethnic violence, 78, 83, now in 2014 in Aludgama, in 2018 in Degana, now the riots recently. So I think I have read quite a bit about how Singapore and how Mr. Lee Kuan Yew have done it. So there is zero tolerance on ethnic violence and ethnic conflict in that country. So is it necessary for Sri Lanka to progress? Otherwise, every 10 years, we will, one after the other, there is a calamity which comes and which puts the whole country back on track for about, towards the backward for about 10, 12 years. This has happened over. So how do we overcome? What we could learn from Singapore experience? How we can, as Mano says, we need to have trust. That trust of security. If security is there in the country as a whole, then everybody is included in that. So how do we go there? So when I talk to my Muslim friends, I'm interested in this. Most of them are saying we are worried because the first step in what happened in Aludgama, 3-4 hours of time was there. Then Muslim shops and houses were destroyed, and it happened in 2018, and it again happened in Kuliyapiti at this time. That has really put back our moderates' authority to impose some kind of reforms, So we are also in a guard. So how do we do that? How we as a country we kind of go beyond that and look towards zero tolerance on hatred and this sectarian violence?
Sri Lanka doesn't have the legislation and also the educational and the social structures that is vital to maintain that long-term stability and peace between the ethnic and religious groups. We should never take peace for granted. Building the Sri Lankan nation should always be a work in progress. That means constantly work, the Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, all these religious and ethnic groups should work together. So how do we forge that Sri Lankan identity? It should have happened in 1948. And since then, we should have never allowed our political masters to play with religion or language. We should have also not allowed the registration of parties on ethnic and religious lines. So we have made a number of mistakes. And I know that I have been subjected to a lot of criticism about the Sinhala Only Act, my comments. But I want to share with you that I met with Mrs. Bandaranayaka, Sirmardi Bandaranayaka. When I met with her, I was with Professor Bruce Hoffman, who is America's #1 expert on counterterrorism. And I asked Ms. Bandaranayaka, I said, Madam, can you explain to me what is the origins of the Sri Lankan conflict? She's a very honest lady, And she said, that's by my husband. So I want you to know that there would have been some injustice for the Sinhalese at that point because the British had a system of divide and rule. But I think the Sinhala Only Act did more harm to Sri Lanka in the long term rather than progress. Perhaps if Mr. S.W.R.D. Bandaranayaka didn't do that, we would have been a first world country by this time. but we are still struggling as a third world country. So my own view is that we need to produce leaders that can see beyond the ethnic and religious divide. I would say that no Muslim leader should speak for the Muslims. A Buddhist leader should speak for the Muslims. A Christian leader should speak for the Muslims. We should have that kind of Sri Lankan identity. But we are still in a very early stage of that. We are still very, I must use the correct word, primitive in our thinking. I have to say this because this is the truth. So we have to think as Sri Lankans. So our founder fathers and our successive leaders didn't build the Sri Lankan nation. So I believe that the Easter Sunday event gives us a good point of reflection. How we can create structures and institutions and laws that will start to build this nation. So Easter Sunday is a moment of great danger, but it is also a moment of great opportunity for us to reflect and move forward to create that Sri Lankan identity. We should never structure ourselves based on India. India is organized in terms of ethno-linguistic religious groups. We should be much beyond that. And the whole world is today facing a threat of dividing these ethnic and religious groups. I think if we divide the world according to ethnic and religious groups, we'll have 12,000 countries. So at least the limited number of ethnic and religious groups we have to work together creating that identity of being a Sri Lankan. So I agree, this requires a lot of work at all levels, from the educators, from the community leaders, the religious leaders. And I would also ask you, especially because of your own background, that is, we have to have the right laws, the legislation that will create the foundation towards building that Sri Lanka. That is still not complete. I think one of our toughest legislation must be on online falsehoods and manipulation. Anyone who posts or disseminate fake news with the very intention of creating disharmony should be investigated, and if found guilty, punished. We should not encourage, or we should always act against those who are inciting hatred, inciting violence. I think this is an opportunity for us to do this, and we should not wait without doing it. Thank you.
Who would like to go next for the next question? Mrs. Senadir?
Professor, you emphasized the need to get the children back to school. And that's a need, absolutely, because that's the only way we can signal that we are back to normalcy. So, in my school, yes, our numbers have been increasing. Well, it started with only 86, which is out of almost 7,000. We had only 86 on the first day. But it's been increasing, and now it has gone up to 25%. And this takes a lot of work. I know there's many principals, many others, teachers in the audience, and I'm sure they would agree to what I say. It takes a lot of time, energy, and time to be there. And I know I heard Dr. Alice saying that on the first day he was at the gate. I too have been at the gate every day from day one. And there I am, opening the doors, thanking the parents for sending the children, etc., etc. And now the numbers have gone up. But still, one day I met a very high up officer of the army. he came to school for something, and in the course of conversation, towards the end of the conversation, he just said, well, I know because my daughter is studying here. I said, okay. So did you send your daughter to school today? No, I'm not. I didn't. So this is one. And we do, going by the vehicles that have been, passing our road, the Rossmead and the Barnes places, it's 25% of the vehicles would be either you, her, na, her, the forces vehicles. But that has diminished to a trickle now. So why can't the security forces, of course we have been given a lot of army protection. They are there, out there showing the parents, we are there to protect your child. But they don't send their children. So that, if we can correct that, I think we would be very much into it. And I read in the papers that the defense school where the forces children are going there were only 32 children. I think there are about 4,000 children. So how can we, get the security forces to showcase their trust in sending the children inside the school? It's to send them inside. The schools are safe, because we most certainly don't want our schools damaged. So we are very, very inside the school. So why don't they send it? That would calm the parents, the other parents, would give a good signal to the other parents.
The greatest treasure we have is our children, No one wants even a child to be hurt a little bit. So it is very natural for the parents to be concerned. But I can share with you that the situation today has normalized, and I believe that government will also make an announcement, because the armed forces, the police and other law enforcement agencies, the intelligence services, they are now aware that the counterterrorism units that did the operation against Zahran and his network, those operations have now almost come to an end. That is the network of Zahran. So I believe that government will sooner or later make that announcement. The very fact that after Vesak, I believe that government will make that announcement. And they should. I don't see any reason, looking at the threat picture and the good work done by the security forces, why schools should remain closed. I don't see why private sector or government institutions should be closed. I also don't see why our airport should have such tight security. Certainly we should screen more, but again, we should look at facilitation. Open facility security is always very challenging, but it is something that Sri Lankan law enforcement and security forces and also intelligence services are quite capable of doing. They are able to detect extremist and terrorist and criminal activity by indicators, signs and clues, by what you call profiling, and we have a number of units that are capable of doing that. So I am very confident that the appearance of a fortress in a hotel or airport is not going to help us. That while we soften the appearance of security, still we can do the same screening and we can still keep a sharp eye on what is happening. Every military person need not be in uniform with a weapon in the hand. We can always have men in civils with concealed weapons who are roaming around, who will respond if they see any threat. And this was the case when the LTT conflict was operating. We had more people in civils in Colombo with concealed weapons who could detect threats. And I think that we should move into a phase of invisible security. And we can also rely also on technology and other capabilities. So my appeal to all schools is you should reopen for the children to come and study. Do not allow what Saharan wanted to happen in this country.
Prof, my question to you is this, is about fake news and rumors, right? And then that contributes a hell of a lot of issue for the general public and also for the security forces. So one of the suggestions we put forward to the government is to have a verification center, right? Where citizens can call and say, is this true? Is this document what being circulated in social media? Is it valid, right, to make statement, even have people calling in and validating. And then I think this was very, very important, and we saw this missing. I think we couldn't get the message across, but it is still a massive problem, right? And truly, I don't want to get in, there is truly lack of leadership in terms of taking this and getting this implemented. What are your thoughts on this, and what would be the message to government? Because this is really is a big problem, because people stay away because there's a massive social media thing. It's about fake news, rumors, and then the hate speech. How do we centralize this, and and then how do we make this happen?
Sri Lanka must create what is called cyber security agency and various capabilities to regulate the cyberspace. You can't have a free cyberspace. People can use cyber, but with responsibility. So my own view is certainly a center for verification and validation is vital, because I think that we have suffered a lot after the Easter Sunday attacks because this very problem was not addressed. I'll give you an example from another country. Indonesia just had their elections, and there were 36 million fake news items that was in cyberspace. It generated a lot of fear and uncertainty. So fake news can really destabilize a nation. It can really take us back. A prelude to a mob violence, to an attack, is fake news. So we have to deal with fake news in a very tough way. That is why I said that our National Security Act should have criminalizing hate speech, incitement to violence, and second is we should criminalize posting and hosting extremist content, online falsehoods, and manipulation. These are laws we should have developed long time ago. Our lawmakers didn't do it. All of you should tell your political leaders, I will not vote for you unless you pass this bill. So my view is that Parliament should get busy doing it, because this is vital. This is vital for the security of this nation. The terrorist attack we can deal with. A large-scale riot of the scale of July 1983, we can't. That is why we have to clean the internet. Anything that is extremist, that is inciting violence, provoking people, all this we have to remove. And we have to hold the tech companies accountable. If they don't remove it in a reasonable time frame, they should be punished too. Their executives should be brought to justice and they should be fined. There must be very tough legislation on these matters.
I want to ask a question regarding something you said, and it's connected to the theme as well. Learning, relearning, unlearning, and perhaps the introspection that the religious bodies need to go through. You talked of regulating the religious space. How does that happen effectively, or how can that happen effectively without such regulation infringing on democratic freedoms? Because that's also something we cherish as a people. And the right to believe something is a democratic freedom. Now, certainly, the right to believe that you have the right to kill someone in the name of religion is perhaps not something we can accept. But how do we regulate, and I'm talking of all religions here. I would be the first to say that even the Christian tradition has its own history of violence, and perhaps in its own way has contributed to, through its Old Testament background, to religious violence. But how do we regulate the religious space without infringing on that cherished democratic principle of freedom of belief and religious expression?
Thank you very much, Reverend. What I have seen is this. The extremist is a person. If you give a little bit of space, he will take the whole room. So, extremism comes from exclusivism. And when extremism heightens, you get a terrorist. So, one of the standards we should have is that religion, person can practice his or her religion, but it should not harm or hurt another person. That is where state should step in. That is where religious leaders should step in. That is where community leaders should step in. So all religions must regulate their own space. Self-regulation. But if they fail, state should take action. And very severe action. But unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, this has not happened. I'll give you a good example. Just before the Easter Sunday attack, there was some attacks against some churches. I do not know whether it is true. But yes. But I was told that there was some activity of conversions. And it had deeply angered the people. I think they also beat some clergymen. Clergymen cannot do this. You see, if a clergyman does this, this is wrong because it will destabilize our country, our nation. That is why I said that they must all exercise their authorities and make sure that their own religious clergy, whether it is a Buddhist monk, whether it's a Christian, whether it is a Maulavi, do not speak out of turn and maintains religious harmony. Religious harmony is very precious and we have to treasure it every day because this is the threat most countries are facing. So I would say the first line is self-regulation. But if not, state should step in. The security and intelligence community, law enforcement agencies must work very closely with the ministries of religious affairs. I also believe that if they don't work, then we will be producing exclusivists and extremists and terrorists. And we should also have strict laws and rules. I have seen some posters that have come up. Don't go and buy from Muslim shops. This nonsense has to stop. Whoever who is saying this should be investigated and there should be sufficient laws that will punish them very severely. In a country like Sri Lanka, you can't do that.
We now open the questions from the audience. You can ask your question from any of the panelists or from Dr. Gunaratna. Any questions?
Yeah, may I go first?
Yeah. Professor Rohan, thank you very much for a very informative lecture. I'm Rear Admiral Sarath Veerasekara. I know you very well. Yeah. And I have two questions for you, rather statement for your views, and two questions for my friend, Mr. Ali Sabri. Rohan, now, don't you think there is a conspiracy of the government and the US to for the US to have a footprint or foothold in Sri Lanka? Because within 24 hours of this attack, the US FBI and intelligence agencies were here. And also the Prime Minister, within a few hours, said in the Parliament that there is international terrorism and request international support. And fortunately, there were no riots. And if there were riots, the US peacekeeping forces would have been here. And after 3 weeks, the government sponsored that attack, because all the people who have came and attacked Menuangara and Kuliapitiya were outsiders, not the villagers. Because even the Sinhalese shops were also attacked. So that also they failed. So I think it's a conspiracy between US and our government for the US to have a foothold in Sri Lanka, because we are on the verge of signing the acquisition and cross services agreement, the SOFA, the State of Forces agreement, and also the MDC agreement. That's number one. Number two, you're also Anandian. We are proud. And Anandians produce, like any other school, produce patriots. And patriots are required to protect the country. And even in future, we require patriots to protect the country. And I don't agree with you when you say the students should not be indoctrinated in that manner. Because we are called, this land is called motherland, because this land has to be loved as you love your own mother. ඉතින් ඔබතුමා ආනන්දයන් කෙනෙක් වෙලා ඒ වගේ දෙයක් කීම ගැන මම අතිශයින්ම කනගාටු වෙනවා. ඒක ඇත්ත නම් ඒකින්ද ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔබතුමාගේ views on it. Mr. Al-Sabri, Professor said that Quran has been misinterpreted. But this Miss Taslima, the famous Muslim lady who is in the hit list of ISIS, she refers to the particular para and the page of the Quran which says the non-Muslims has to be killed. And the non-Muslims have to be, the heads has to be severed from the body. So I need your view about that. And the second thing, I think it's the great silence of the Muslim elite and Muslim moderates toward this issue. Because this Beirul incident started with Muslim youth stopping a vehicle and dragging a bhikshu, a Buddhist monk, outside and then assaulting him. And what follows is we condemn. Those should be sentenced to death. You see, but that particular incident which started these riots, I never heard the Muslim moderate condemning that. And the second thing, in this present...
Please confine to one question.
Also, I think the Muslim elite and the Muslim educated and the religious leaders must come out and say that we condemn these madrasa schools. And there have to be only one rule, including the marriage rule in Sri Lanka. And we accept the banning of burqa. And these things, I think, the Muslim moderate must come out and say, and then only හදවත් තුළ ඔබතුමන්ලා ගැන තියෙන සැකය නැති වෙන්නේ අන්න ඒ වගේ ප්‍රකාශයක් ඊටාම තදින් කිව්වොත් පමණයි. අලි සබ්බීස් මගේ හොඳ ෆ්‍රෙන්ඩ්, ඒකින්ද මම ඔබතුමාගේ views ගැන අහනවා. Thank you.
I must speak first. You are Ali Sabri, you have to respond to him first. Let me respond first. You have served Sri Lanka. So I have great admiration for your service. Even if you have disputed me, I salute you for the work that you have done for this nation. As much as I respect you, I have to dispute you today. Because you have become a conspiracist. And you should not do so. Sri Lanka, I agree with you, should have an equidistant foreign policy. we should have good relations with the Chinese, with the Indians, and with the West, especially with the US and Europe. We cannot side with any of those power blocks, because if we do that, we will be harmed. During President Jayawardana's period, I met the founder head of RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, because Sri Lanka suffered so much because the LTT and 5 other groups were armed, trained and financed in India by the Indian government. RAW trained the first batch of Tamil Tigers in Uttar Pradesh, north of Chakrata in Dehradun, second batch in Himachal Pradesh, 7 other batches in Tamil Nadu, including that woman, Tenmuli Rajaratnam, alias Danu, who killed Rajiv Gandhi. Why did India do this? So President Jayawardena asked me to find out why. So I went to India and I met the founder head of RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, R.N. Kao. I have written about this in my book, Indian Intervention in Sri Lanka. I may be the only one who has met R.N. Kao and interviewed him. And he spoke to me very openly. And I published my interview. He said, because you had the Trincomalee oil tank farms, you want to give it to the Americans. You want to give the Trincomalee port to the Americans. You had a Voice of America station that was listening to our communication, which was not the case. Then you said that you have an Israeli interest section, you have ties with Pakistan, China and all that. Said you had stepped out of the non-aligned orbit when we were within the Soviet sphere of influence, meaning India. So he said that the only way they can gain leverage is to arm, train, finance and direct the terrorists. I think this should be a good lesson for us. Never to side with any country. So I agree with you that we shouldn't have an alliance with just one country to fight terrorism. We should work with all countries. But I disagree with you that America had anything to do with this attack, IS attack. This is by a terrorist group. The United States is not behind the group called the Islamic State. I have seen a lot of propaganda in Sri Lanka saying that ISIS is nurtured by the US. Is not true. Certainly, US made a mistake by invading Iraq. That created the environment for IS to emerge. But US never funded IS. This is wrong. I have been to Afghanistan more than 10 times. I have interviewed many Al-Qaeda members. US also never funded Al-Qaeda. US funded the anti-Soviet multinational jihad, but not that group called Al-Qaeda. These are very fanatical groups. They wouldn't get US assistance. So I agree with what you said in terms of having an equidistant foreign policy. That's what you didn't say, but what is in your heart. Because we suffered a lot in the past, but no conspiracy. Your question about my own school, that you and I treasure. It produced the fighters necessary for that time. The time has passed. Today, our school should be reconfigured to build the Sri Lankan nation. You and I should go back to our school and discuss this with the teachers and the students. Thank you.
Another question?
I have a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Veerasekara, again, General Veerasekara, I have the same feeling for what you have done for the country. That is never will be disputed. But having said so, if you are asking Taslima Nasreen to describe Islam, it's like you are asking Adolf Balasingham or Balasingham to describe Sri Lanka. She is somebody, is gone out of Islam, used by the West to throw mud at Islam. She is not the benchmark. Islam is not that. Islam, Quran, very important that you ask that question. Quran is not a textbook, or is not a catalogue either. Quran is revelation, which we have believed, the way we believe, a discussion between the God and the Prophet through Jibreel. It happened over a 23 period of time. Some of those revelations and instructions came during the war. Some of those came during the marriage. Some of those things came during the trade. So, for you to take it one word out of context and keep it is very unfair. Some of them are using this Al-Tawbah 8.12 is where during the war, some instructions were given how to fight the war. But even the previous one and the subsequent one, they don't read it. They just quote this and say kill. That's not the case. The case was their prophet was chased away from Mecca, of his own place, while that was going on in that time. After that, prophet went 400 kilometers away and lived there and came back. And they had signed an agreement that they will have safe passage. The non-believers at that time, in that context, disputed them and started fighting them. So they were under pressure. Then it was coming instructions, now you fight. If they are fighting you, fight them, kill them. It's an instruction, like you were in the middle of the war, like in the Vadamarachi operation. You are fighting, everybody is rounded. And your commander is saying, don't leave any terrorist to get away, kill them. Can somebody 25 years later say that that meant kill entirety of the Tamil population in this country? So this is what is out of context. This is readily available in the Islamophobia material all over the world. It's readily available. You just take it, translate it, and send it across. That's what's happening. So the Quran, which I have learned, is saying, Quran says, if you harm a single life of person, it's like harming the entirety of the humanity. And if you protect a single life, it's like protecting everybody. Now that's, I think we have failed, that over a period of time as Muslims, we would have more cooperated with you, discussed with you, got these doubts out of your mind and all those things. This is an opportunity for that. That happened after 9/11 in US. Here also will happen. So good that you are asking this question. Several of my friends have asked this question. We have prepared certain documentation for this and we have shared those things. And that is what it is about. So I can assure, if that is the case, 1.8 billion people killing the non-Muslim, no non-Muslims will be living in this world. And we have lived here, 2 million Muslims in this country for 11 centuries. None of us have gone and done anything like that other than these ISIS fellows. You know, I mean, right now, 1.2 million Sri Lankans are working in the Middle East. Primarily Muslim countries. 900,000 of them are non-Muslims. Are they being killed? Are they being harmed? And then will they work there? Voluntarily they are working. I know in Qatar alone, 165,000 Sri Lankans are working. They have adopted that country as their second home. So it's our duty to find out, not to allow this hatred to come in. There are a few people who want to create division. We must fight them and we must feel how to build the Sri Lankan identity. Just to 2 minutes and I'll tell about what my fear is. I understand that. What happened in Aludgama, there was an incident. Maybe true, maybe not. But I don't know whether you know, they were charged in the court and about 3 months ago, all of them were acquitted after a full-blown trial. So that incident of going after or obstructing the priest and assaulting him was disproved after a full-blown trial. That may be true. So this can happen every day. So can that kind of a single incident trigger a riot? You can't allow that, you know. And in Digana also the same. Some drunkard 2 Muslim young boys, they are first drunk at that time, went and hammered a non-Muslim boy and he died. And can it trigger things like that? Every day this could happen. No, I can drive and I can knock somebody off on an accident, but that cannot trigger a riot. it cannot be. Then we are now, none of us are safe in this country. That's what I am saying. We can't have that. We have to have rule of law stronger. And we are not saying that anybody had done a mistake, whether Muslim or Sinhala or Burger, doesn't matter. Take the law to the fullest course and punish them. But what can the innocent people can do? You know, so we must have a way to meet this differently. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Any other question?
Yes, Professor, thank you for the insightful presentation. Being the patriotic citizen you are, we are always wise after the event. Did you not inform the powers that be that this impending terror?
In 2016, there was a full-paged article that appeared in a Sri Lankan newspaper. I had given an interview about IS, and in that I very clearly mentioned for everyone to know that there were a few hundred IS supporters in Sri Lanka. So in 2016, it was known to everyone. But I also want to tell you that IS, the fact that Sri Lankans went to Syria and Iraq is not a secret. The then Minister of Justice, Vijaydas Rajapaksa, he told in Parliament, and he even put a slide of those who traveled to Syria and Iraq. At that time, someone disputed him, but I want to tell you that he presented the most accurate information, even in Parliament, with photographs, with names and details. I am privy to that information. Government knew at that time that the Islamic State had seeded a network in this country. And IS has a magazine called Dabik. Dabik published, dedicated a number of pages to the first Sri Lankan foreign terrorist fighter that died in Syria. His name is Nilam. He came from Kandy. So it was not a secret anymore that Sri Lankans were traveling to Syria and fighting, and that one day they will bring back to Sri Lanka ideology, network, and the skills to mount the same type of attacks that they had participated or supported in Iraq and Syria. It is called the blowback effect. So I believe that the government leaders are fully responsible, and they should be held accountable for this attack. As I explained in detail to all of you, there was a security and intelligence platform that was dismantled. As I explained, the military was called to the barracks. As I explained, the barricades and the barriers were removed. As I explained, the spirit and the morale of those servicers, those men and women who are the guardians of the state, they were investigated. Some of them imprisoned, some of them asked to leave the country. So I believe that when you compromise security and create a permissive environment, it becomes a base for criminals and terrorists to take root. I had had several discussions with the government, and in fact, on the 21st of March, 1 month before, I had discussed with the relevant Sri Lankan government agency for securing this nation much before the Indians provided that information. The profile of Zahran. Although Zahran could not be effectively monitored because he was using encrypted technologies, Zahran had gone underground after the fight in Katankudi. And he was producing IS propaganda. His Facebook account, which has now been taken down, very clearly indicated his shift towards IS. So it was very apparent that the security intelligence apparatus or the national security structure in this country had been compromised. And that is why we suffered an attack. Sri Lanka faces twin threats. We still have 3 organizations supporting the LTT operating in Tamil Nadu. The group led by Nedumaran, the group led by Vaiko known as V. Gopalasamy, and the group led by Seaman, Nam Tamilar. So I believe that Sri Lankans should be vigilant and alert of the threat that is coming from the remnants of the Tamil Tigers. Similarly, we should be exceptionally cautious of the threat coming from IS, from the Middle East, that has now created the provinces in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in India. So the foundation of social stability, political stability, and economic prosperity is security. One should never compromise security, especially a country that had fought a war. And when it was very evident that 41 Sri Lankans traveled to Syria and Iraq. Security is a very specialized subject. Politicians should not interfere in matters of security. It's like you send a gynecologist to do a brain surgery. He'll kill the patient. So it's a very specialized field. They must not interfere. They must allow the security forces, even today, for them to do the operations. And they will do it because they know the price of negligence. Their own colleagues, their families have suffered. So I believe that we have to maintain that alertness and vigilance. And without that, we cannot build a prosperous Sri Lanka. We can't move Sri Lanka from that third world country to a first world country. Thank you.
Can we have one last question,
I have
please?
a question here, Professor, on this side. My name is Adil. I'm a Muslim, but I'm from Anand. Because it is a more educationist forum, I like to put a question on the schools and the universities. We are calling for integration of all the civilians at the top. Majority consists of the adults, and we disintegrate everybody at bottom at school level. Religious-based schools, ethnicity-based schools, various things. So I have a few suggestions. I want to know whether you think this will work or this will not work. Every school should be asked to allocate 30% from the other community, whoever it is. Sports is a huge integrator. Drive sports in every schools. Extracurricular activity is a huge integrator. Promote extracurricular activities through harmony clubs. Award a scholarship to university based on extracurricular activities and sports. Not only to make doctors and lawyers and scientists. Award scholarship and make sure the children go to sports and take sports seriously. These, I don't think, need legislation or legislatures to interfere. Principals can make a call and make it happen tomorrow. I ask you whether it is possible or not.
It is possible, but you have to invite Admiral to have iftar with you tomorrow, breakfast. Can you do that? Can you go and sit next to him and invite him? If you can do that, you can do this too. So it is the human bridge that we have to create. We have to have the laws. But I can see that you have the spirit and the passion to do it too. So you need both. You see, if you have the laws, that will deter the exclusivists and the extremists, certainly the terrorists. But if you have the heart, you will generate the passion and friendship, the emotional connection. Certainly you can do it. Let me share with you an example. One of Sri Lanka's greatest successes that has not been sufficiently advertised is that when the Sri Lankan conflict ended in May 2009, 10 years ago, there was a program to rehabilitate 11,500 Tamil tigers. It's an immensely successful program. Many of those Tamil tigers told me that they feared that they'll rot in jail because many of them were killers. But Sri Lanka decided, without putting them in jail, to put them in welfare centers. So a 6-pronged rehabilitation program was developed. The first is religious and spiritual rehabilitation. So they went back to religion. Because Prabhakaran, what he did is, he took the religion out from them. So we reintroduced religion. Second is educational rehabilitation. Teachers went and taught them. The military had the cadet corps teachers. They were brilliant teachers, very patient, like the teachers here. So they spend time, making them think, critical thinking. Third is social and family rehab. So the social workers reconnected them with their families. Then their grandmothers told them, my son, look what has happened to you. You become terrorist. I wanted you to be a doctor. So they reconnected with the families. Next is vocational rehabilitation. Many companies had agriculture, farming, fishery, computers reintroduced. So they had a set of skills when they left the rehab center. Another is recreational rehabilitation. We had these top sports stars playing with them, giving them bats and all that. Volleyball, netball. Humanized them, because Prabhakaran took them out of the mainstream Sri Lankan society and made them deviants, hate Sri Lanka. But we made them love Sri Lanka. Then next is creative arts in rehab. Song, dance, music, puppetry was reintroduced. And finally, psychological rehabilitation. Some of them had hate in their heart, and that was removed through counselors. So you are proposing something very similar along those lines, where we can work across the ethnic and religious divide to build Sri Lanka. Certainly, you should move forward with all of that. And I want to tell you that since the attacks, I had divided my time, spent more time with my Muslim friends and colleagues. And a Sri Lankan Muslim here from the Bora community, he already put up a proposal today, just before I came here. In their mosques, they will have a harmony center where they will invite Sinhalese, Buddhists, Christians, Tamils, Hindus, all those people to come and share the food, learn about each other's religions, the commonalities. So, tremendous progress. That is why I said that, as I spoke to you today, This incident will make us stronger and better. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished panel. Can we please rise to give a round of applause to Dr. Rohan Gunaratna, who has come all the way to Sri Lanka for this occasion.